All right, so it's 3, so let's kick this off. So thank you everybody for coming to our latest Patreon crowdcast. I've stopped numbering them because I can't keep up with them now. But our guest today is very close to home. We have CU Boulder's Swedish instructor, senior instructor now.
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah, well, yes. In number of years we're counting, and I've been here for about 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so Merete Leonhardt-Lupa, who is also, I recently found out, author of a book about motherhood.
Aha! Oh, you've done your research.
I did. Well,
absolutely.
I was trying to put up.
Time ago.
Well, I was trying to put stuff on the promo for the crowdcast, and I saw that. And I thought,
yeah.
Is that the same?
No, it's the same person. I've had many lives.
Well,
and I did write a book about becoming a mother written many years prior to starting here. And it's in English, no Swedish.
Well, we can take questions about motherhood as well, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your experience here and what you do teaching Swedish.
Well, I am born and raised in Sweden, as you can probably hear from my accent, and moved over here when I was young, 26, something like that, and have pretty much lived here ever since, although I do go home home, so you hear what I still call home is Sweden, and in the summer, so the summer months when we don't have classes here at CU, I go home and check out what's going on in Sweden and what are people talking about and what's changing.
And where in Sweden is home?
And Sweden is at home for me is on the Swedish west coast, north of Gothenburg. There's a nice archipelago. So, a couple of fjords and all the picturesque thing that you might associate with Sweden.
Pretty part of Sweden.
And pretty impressive rune stones and carvings from the Stone Age and so on. There's some historical markers there too.
What's your town?
Countryside. I'm out in where the road ends, pretty much.
Awesome.
So then the water begins. That's what you'll find. But when I'm not in Sweden, I teach first, second, and third years Swedish here at CU, which is actually, I don't know if you know this, but it's pretty unique for the States. We don't have that many programs. About 30 or so have first and second year Swedish, but there's only maybe 3 or 4 that has that third year that we offer here.
Yeah, that is uncommon.
Yeah.
I think Berkeley and Wisconsin both have 3 years.
No.
Even those?
Yeah, no.
Wow.
Yeah. And you do a distance too.
Oh, that's right. Because I do remember at UCLA that after the first year it was all done by Skype, basically.
I do have another commitment actually, and that's some online courses, and they were first developed at UWM in Wisconsin, Milwaukee. And we had a beginner course and we had an advanced course there too. But unfortunately, the instructor who was tied to that in university is sick right now, so we can't run those courses. So I'm hoping in the future we can transfer them here to CU. I'm hoping not this next year, but the following, so 2022, that we can start offering that here too.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
CU. Yeah, because there's a lot of requests for online courses, and I think we can come up with a good one. Yeah.
So have you started developing? Do you have an online curriculum?
Yeah, and we have there is, but I think it needs some tweaking and so on. But it's there. Yeah, it should be.
And you're the instructor.
I would be now, yeah, because unfortunately, Veronica can't do it. Yeah.
So when you are teaching Swedish here at CU, what is your procedure? I mean, I know that you think a
What's
lot
my
about,
procedure?
but I know that you think a lot about
Yeah,
language
yeah,
teaching.
yeah, yeah. I do. And I must say, I think that language teaching has really developed the last years as a profession. We learned many new techniques, which makes it, I think, easier in some ways to learn the language, more practical, depending on what you want out of your education. What are your goals? Why are you learning Swedish? You have to ask yourself that. But I think we have some pretty good answers as to how we can get you to your goals. And we are lucky here because the program is pretty small, and when you get first year is pretty basic phrases you learn to get around in an everyday situation in Sweden.
Right.
But on in the more advanced courses, you have some opportunity to really dig into your special subjects that you are interested in. If there you have special topics, as I'm sure your viewers might have some
I think so.
Specific needs for why they would want to learn Swedish.
Well, so what has changed about language teaching in the last few years? What's different now?
I think people started to really fall for the pressure, if you say so, that the language has to be practical. You have to learn something that you can actually use. What's the point in teaching us students then a lot of grammar structures and maybe vocabulary that's out of context, that doesn't make sense, or that you can't really bring you closely to something that you want to do with the language. So yeah, I think we're much more focused on specific goals that we break up on. Okay, let's learn how to behave in the restaurant and what phrases we need, or if it's reading, you into okay, what kind of text do you want to read?
So it's more targeted now?
It's more targeted and it's more specific, and it's the techniques are just more. I would say, wow, what has changed? We try to teach in a way that we really are natural for language learning, and the prevailing theory right now is that it's very you can utilize a lot of the natural learning language learning capacity that you have from childhood, and then learning a new language is not really that different, even when you're up in ages. It's better because you can also think cognitively. You can have meta knowledge about the language, but there are also certain things that you can do to make it easier to learn in a way that you acquire the language rather than just having to study the book and what's on page 35. Let's memorize this.
So like what can someone do to make that process easier?
Well, I would say that it's important to have a teacher and someone that you can talk to back and forth with. You're always having a conversation, and then the teacher's job is to keep it at a level that you can understand and that you can sort of absorb and that you can follow. And at that point, that's when you naturally acquire a lot of language just in the process, without having to sit down with a long list of words and memorize.
Yeah, I never saw
it's
it.
very different. I have to modify that too, because it also depends on the individual. We have, students have different learning stuff going on and needs different things. But in general, I think that helps the language learn. But I'm interested in hearing how did you learn?
Well, actually, what I was going to ask you to do is critique how I taught.
Oh, okay.
Because I taught Norwegian and I taught modern Icelandic. So I taught Norwegian at UCLA and I taught modern Icelandic at Berkeley. Mm-hmm. And when I was teaching these modern languages, because mostly I teach ancient languages, right?
Yeah,
so
who
cares about the spoken part? Right. But with Norwegian and Icelandic, as somebody with a pretty philological, pretty linguistic background, right? I would start off by teaching the grammar, right? Which in Norwegian takes an hour.
Right.
And then I assigned
Then what do you do?
Yeah. Well, then you have a lot.
It's just
then
the
you-
rest.
Yeah. Then you have a lot of time to practice.
Yeah.
And then in Icelandic, it takes 5 years. But it's
Yeah.
so after getting, because I always felt like if I can get students to where they can produce their own sentences, then I am enabling them to move forward, talking about or reading or listening to, in the case of things like podcasts, which are a great way to learn languages now, with whatever subjects they want. So I would start by basically, I would use word frequency lists. I would make sure they knew the grammatical paradigms for the most common verbs, for instance, right? So in Norwegian, to make sure they knew, vara and bli and kuna and all these really early on. And then what I tried to do was kind of shepherd students into learning, into adding to that vocabulary the vocabulary they needed for their interests. Now, these were fairly small classes. Let's say I had someone who, mostly was interested in it because of his family background. So, like, what are you going to need to go to Norway and be looking through these old archives or something? So then we're looking at, fairly archaic bokmål and and everything you're going to kind of that way. So the Fraktur alphabet.
Yeah.
So someone like those are small classes, and obviously being somebody who is so oriented toward dead languages, that probably has a lot to do with my grammar orientation. What do you do? How would you critique that, maybe?
Well, I think they were great for the purposes that you just talked about, right? You do have more of a sort of a cognitive understanding of the language than maybe a lot of my students who come in and say, well, I want to be able to speak to Swedes on a sort of a daily basis when I go over to Sweden on my study abroad year. Or I need some Swedish for my research, and that could be in just any subject. Or a third group of students that come into my classes are students who have who are what we call heritage learners. They have a parent maybe who's Swedish, and they just want to learn the English.
Right.
So they often have communication, interpersonal communication needs, wanting to be able to communicate with Swedish people in the language.
Right, they want to jump right in.
So that's at least year one. So then year two, we do more content based, which sounded like you did also a little bit. You use the texts, test examples of the topics that students are interested in, and you learn the language while you study this text also.
Well, and for me, I mean, being, I guess, fairly laissez-faire by attitude and inclination, I often would basically let them find their texts, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're interested in airplanes,
Right.
read about airplanes in Norwegian, right?
Awesome.
Like that was part of
Awesome.
what my attitude was.
Yeah.
Because too often I think students get into this trap. And this is something it'd be great for you to talk about. The FICA you do a little bit, because I think it's very different from this.
Yeah.
But you get into this trap where students who are learning a language basically repeat the same 5 things over and over again. Right?
Yeah. Well, repetition is important.
Yes, but I mean,
but not. Yeah, you don't want to be.
But you get them together to talk. You say, okay,
Right.
we're just going to talk in Norwegian for an hour, and all they say is like,
Right.
my name is.
No. Yeah. No, you can sort of you just have to lower the level of the topic. You can't jump into a very complicated text until
No. You have to scaffold it.
You have to scaffold all the way up, of course. But you can still start at what interests you. And actually, I ask my students, what should I tell students who want to study maybe on their own and who are not coming into class, and how should they do it? And well, I have some ideas if you're interested in hearing that, but also what they said was pick something you're interested in, right? And find there's so much on the net. Of course, you just find YouTube clips or on subject or some web pages, and knowing that at least 20% of all words are cognate between Swedish and English, so that you can understand, you can guesstimate a lot about the words of the vocabulary.
That's a
if you know German, you know another 10%. But that gives you confidence, and especially in reading, it's easier to figure out what's going on than listening to Sweden. Here's the thing about Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish: they sound, and how they sound and what they look like in writing doesn't make sense to English speakers.
Well, not right away.
Because it's very different than what you see.
But once you figure out the system, it's not that bad.
No. But that takes a while. The first year is pretty much you trying to learn and to see the connection between listening and reading.
Do you find teaching the tones to be pretty difficult?
Yeah,
that's hard.
Yeah, that is, yes. And I mean, my attitude is, I want you to be comprehensible. I don't need you to be 100% correct,
Sure.
And to be, to sound like you're a native speaker, because that's like setting the bar so high it's not going to happen. I mean, listen to me. I'm here for so many years. I speak with Swedish accent, but so just I said realistic goals is really important. How
do you know what a realistic goal is? If you're, say someone out there wants to learn Swedish, doesn't have access to a class at university,
right.
How does that student know what a realistic goal is for a year from now?
And a very good system is the ACTFL has a proficiency guidelines.
That's ACTFL.
Exactly.
ACTFL, yeah.
And if you look at them, they break down to individual statements, what you can do, what you expect to learn the first year.
Right.
And you might not be interested in learning all of that, but it gives you an idea of what's achievable in the first first level of a language learning. And it takes you, it's if you think of it as a pyramid, except it's an inverted pyramid. So in the beginning, when you start learning a language, the learning curve is really high. You learn quickly, yeah? So the higher up you go in the levels, which is when you can start create with language, right? When you can put together sentences yourself, then that takes a long time. And to be really at the advanced level is also more work.
So the ACTFL standards are pretty good.
Yeah,
to go.
Yeah. I think for figuring it out on your own, what you can expect, I think that would go there and look. Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to keep asking questions. If you folks have questions, go ahead and ask them. One thing I wanted to ask you to talk about a little bit is the FICA.
Yeah, FICA. Okay. So FICA, we have about once a month. And it's just an opportunity for you to come and listen to Swedish or speak Swedish if you're a learner. And it doesn't have a structure. I'm there most of the time, but it's also students and other people who just come in and meet. And that's a place where you can just give it a go. Yeah. Try it out.
I've even heard Danish and Har's Norwegian there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've had many languages in the Nordic group for sure.
But really, there are so many great opportunities now for learners to get exposed to the language through something they're interested in. Yeah. I mean, this is, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one thing that people get into too much as new learners of a language is the only thing they can think of to talk about in the language is the language, right? Like the first thing they think of when they meet, say, a Swede and when press it's Swedish, is like, oh, I'm learning Swedish, and that's all. Yeah. But that's not what people mostly talk about. So I try to get people to get informed about the vocabulary is something that's a natural interest of theirs. And one of the best ways to do that is to use the multiple online resources there are now.
Yeah.
Facebook groups,
I
right?
know, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
Just
Any subject that interests you, find it. And it's easy to look up Google what the equivalent would be in Swedish, and you can that way find great resources. I know a lot of my students have their favorite Facebook groups and YouTube clips and so on.
I like
blogs that they follow, and that what that subject is, that varies from the individuals. I mean, some are into archaeology and they'll study that. Oops, I hear a little friend coming in. Yeah.
That's Scout.
So that's Scout. He's got a little hat on.
He's my bravest chickadee. But here, John Daly here makes a point. A big problem with learning Swedish is they all speak English. And they're also polite. As soon as they hear you stumble, they immediately switch over.
Yeah.
Do you have a recommendation for someone who's trying to?
Yes. Just tell the darn person you're speaking to, I'm trying to learn this thing. No, I think that's true. They don't want to correct you unless they have your permission. So you make sure you give them permission to do that.
Okay,
And,
so say.
So we're trying to find people who are sympathetic listeners, we call them, which will sort of slow down for you or give you some feedback on what you're doing and so on. And there are many people. I mean, there, and yeah, I'm sure you're aware of it, but there are even groups where you can join, where you can get a partner from Sweden or a Swedish speaker.
Of this online pen pal things.
Yeah, precis. And we had the greatest one for a year. There's a website called Call a Swede.
Call a Swede.
Yeah, 24/7. You could just.
It's kind of fun.
And somebody just volunteered in Sweden to sit there and they took turns in it, which is good to you.
If this is an actual emergency, do not contact your Swede. Wow, that's interesting.
No.
But I mean, I sympathize with this a little bit because when I was first learning Icelandic or Norwegian, especially, I would find people that just put up a wall, right? I mean, as soon as they figured out, which didn't take that long, but I wasn't a native speaker. Like one of those frustrating experiences I remember having, and I'm sure this comment comes out of a similar experience, is I was buying books in Iceland once, and all the books I'm buying are in Icelandic. And I'm talking to the cashier in Icelandic, and he responds back to me in English.
Oh, well, yes.
Come on, what?
Yeah,
why?
I get that, but that's so frustrating, right?
Yeah, it's like, what am I doing? What's so unacceptable about this? Like, I clearly know Icelandic. But yeah, actually.
Yeah, that's laziness, I would say.
Although, you know what he said to me? He said, "Your Faroese in time."
Oh, what?
Oh, I thought I was Faroese, but
okay.
I don't know. But Icelanders be worried about this because Icelanders are so unused to hearing foreign accents. But this is something that's different from English to the Scandinavian languages. Not as much now, but in English we're so used to different accents that we automatically just sort of accept it. Like we think, oh, okay, this person has an accent. We don't think about switching.
No, but they're not so different either as some Swedish or Danish and Norwegian accents are.
Oh, sure.
Right? I mean,
this is my new thing in Norwegian,
yeah.
right? Because I actually speak a sort of regional Norwegian, right? So, but at my best, I can speak it well enough that people ask me where I'm from. This sort of like.
Yes, that is a badge of honor.
Colorado doll. Well, they can tell that I'm not.
Well, yeah, but they didn't say.
From Colorado doll. But that's something that I think. See if you agree. But I think that's a fun trick you can try is insert some regionalisms, so it kind of confuses people. Right?
Yeah, give it a go.
Just think about it. Somebody from Sweden speaks English to you with a Texas accent. You're not quite sure.
No, what language are you continuing with here? It's gonna get you the furthest.
It may sound like I'm totally joking, but I think it actually can be helpful. Under T asks, how much real dialect variation is there in Swedish versus Norwegian? It seems like almost as much.
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Norwegian dialects. I mean, the two languages, but the dialect. But Swedish, there's a big difference between what people speak in the south and up north, and I mean, there's regions that are really small too.
Yeah.
I grew up in Vänersborg, which is a small little town by the big lake, Vänern, and 30K to the south was another small town, and there was a third one, and they were all about the same distance between each other, and you knew exactly where people came from when you met in school and so on. Even 20K outside town, like, okay, I can place you geographically by what you were saying. Yeah, and Norway had definitely with all the valleys and so yeah, it's fun. It makes it interesting, and it's not. It makes it a little tough when you're learning, but it's not it's something you can't overcome. It's not like you have to learn 15 languages to understand one region.
And subjectively, I like a lot of regional Swedish accents, right?
Yeah, they're pretty.
I like to do that. I like how that sounds for some reason. I like Finland Swedish for some reason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's beautiful. Very singing
and it's very subjective, but I have a certain aesthetic kind of like. But it's
so that's the thing about Swedish, I think, and I'm glad you brought up Finland, because you do if you just study Swedish, you pick that as your language, you do have Sweden have to 10, 11 million people, but you'd also have Finland actually that you cover, and of course you will understand Norwegian, most of it, depending on the accent, but and you will at least be able to read some Danish, although it tends to be a little harder to understand Danish. And if it is, and don't feel bad, because Swedes have a hard time too, right? Yeah.
And if you are a Swedish speaker who wants to learn to understand a little bit more Danish to go to Denmark, you can always try watching Bruen.
Yeah, that's
right, because then you get both.
Both.
Let's again kind of set up a situation where you've got somebody who's sitting at home, wherever, thinking, I'd love to learn Swedish or another Scandinavian language, maybe.
Yeah.
No university close by.
Right.
What can you tell him or her? Like, what's a formula you could follow?
If you want to start with the basics, and I recommend you do that before really getting into specialty subjects, it's good to take just like some time with the basics. There is a couple of things. There's Duolingo, so I'm sure you've heard of that, or maybe not. But Duolingo is just an app that you can practice basic vocabulary, this basic phrases with, and it actually works pretty well for its purposes.
Okay.
Just to get some vocabulary going. I noticed that my students who've done that before coming to class, they take off really rapidly. So it's really helpful. What it can't do, it can't teach you how to communicate with each other, to hold a conversation, to create with language. It's not that easy.
So it's a digital flashcard kind of flashcard.
Yeah, it's kind of a flashcard or multiple choice, but it's fun. It's a fun one, and people really get into it. It's almost like a computer game, like you just. You can do it on the bus for 10 minutes, but it sticks with you. So it's very popular. I like that. Sweden there's an online course that's free, that's open to everybody. Learningswedish.se, which is it's pretty high quality. The language is pretty high quality. That's on there, and it was put together by some government organization. It's really boring interface. Oh my gosh! You don't want to. Yeah, and there it is. Yeah, and but it does give you the basics, and then there's some little film clips and stuff in there too that you can. And it has a grammar section. So it's a pretty traditional classic way of learning, but it's workful and it's free. It's free,
Yeah.
and which is great. And if you would want to have a speaker partner, they actually offer that. They offer tutors online too.
That's
So,
nice.
and that's at a cost, but at least there's an option to do that. Yeah,
Okay.
that's pretty good.
And then for reading, I've noticed that Kindle, even just the normal Amazon Kindle app in the US, has a lot of Swedish titles now.
Yeah, it does. All of a sudden, it's
Yeah,
happening
it
right
is.
now as we speak.
It is kind of recent.
Seriously, yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed it's really boomed with Scandinavian language titles, including Icelandic.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic?
It's been amazing.
Yeah.
And one thing that I find, I think motivation is a hard thing for people trying to learn on their own.
Yeah, it is. Find a group if you can. It's just so much easier to have someone to.
Yeah.
Even if it's not a Swedish speaker, you can't find that, but just someone who's studying language.
Right. Someone to practice with. It's not just one.
Yeah.
You're not just talking to a mirror.
Right.
But,
although a lot of stuff is actually done also with what we call the inner voice, and you speak to yourself. You don't have anyone to speak to, but if you can sort of advance your help with memorization by having little conversations with yourselves. Say, all right, bird there, fågel sitter där.
Right.
Ett fönster, var då? Jag ser ingen fågel. Ja, där är en fågel. And then you just, it helps you to start creating the language and figure out what stuff.
Right, and that can be a little bit, I think maybe that can feel a little bit forced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anything does.
But something like that.
Put that on the shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, but something like that has actually helped me, because when I was learning modern languages, one thing I would do is I would say, okay, when I'm driving, which is a fair amount, right? When I'm driving, I'm thinking in Icelandic, and so I would channel my road rage. No joke. I would actually channel my road rage through
Icelandic. Do you know in Icelandic?
Plenty.
And they come just like natural.
Well, yeah, actually pretty natural now. But I would think, like, what would I say to this other driver? But that's not that forced, because I'm already thinking about how much I hate these people.
And you have the emotion, and it's all.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah. And if you live somewhere like Boulder or the Bay Area in California,
you're
mad at everybody. So I mean, you have something, and it's a great. So it's kind of like they say when you're raising bilingual children, have one parent speaking one language and one parent speaking the other. You may have opinions about that too.
No, I totally agree.
But if you,
I didn't.
Well, but it's like that because you have a particular context in which you are associating that language.
Yeah.
It's not just, okay, I'm going to sit here for 10 minutes. I'm going to make myself think of this. Okay. No. Yeah. Well, like you said, Foodlands sit there, like, all right, that gets forced after a while. But also those social media opportunities, like I said, Facebook groups, like I'm only on Facebook like once in a blue moon now, but I'm in Foodlands or so I see all the people's bird pictures and talk about birds.
And I mean, and if you do have a Facebook, and you're following someone that you admire as a topic that you'd like to learn more about, you have the ability to make a comment and see what happens. Yeah,
and actually, that's something. Before I get to this question here, that's actually something I was going to point out.
Yeah, someone says Twitter has been.
When I was also learning Icelandic, this is like 15 years ago now, but I started editing Icelandic Wikipedia. And the thing is, it's instant feedback.
Yeah.
Because people see you've just posted, I created the Icelandic.
Make sense.
Actually, I created the Icelandic Wikipedia article about Malagasy.
No way.
And like instant feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people go and they correct it because it's a new article. All right. So John Davis says.
Go for it. You just need to be a little brave.
Exactly. Yeah. Nobody's gonna guillotine you for not getting something right. Do you advise students to primarily stay within familiar topics and vocabulary, or work more with materials that they're less familiar with, i.e. maybe they've never seen half the words in a news article? How much do your most successful students work beyond their current level?
My most successful students probably stay pretty much at the level, is my guess. No, maybe not. No, they read books. They read in the more advanced texts. Yeah, so they go a little bit beyond what we can do in the classroom. You know, classroom has a certain pace, of course.
Do you have a target amount of vocabulary each day or week or something like that? Do you anything like that? We use numbers.
No, I don't use numbers. We go by content and topics and what is reasonable to learn about a topic. So it's more about the information, and then you pick up vocabulary and structures along the way. I'm not so totally focused on certain vocabulary to learn.
I tried that 1 year where I was actually going for a certain target amount of vocabulary a week. It's really, really hard to do because if you're not keeping in circulation,
right,
if you're not using it every week, just forget it.
It's a different memory.
It's like teaching to a test.
Yeah, it really is.
So we do have a question out here in the Ask a Question feature. Guillermo says, what grammar book would you recommend to start learning Swedish if you have a strong background in English grammar and are familiar with German?
So there is one book. Yeah, I think it's basic Swedish grammar or something, but Hincliffe is the author.
Hincliffe, is that H-E-N?
H-I-N-C-L-I-F-F.
Okay, all right, there you go.
One and a half.
And the book is probably blue and or gold.
Yes, it's blue. Of course, it's blue.
Everything about Swedish is always blue.
Yeah.
But,
see if we can.
But also, there's so many great. I mean, Sweden has a lot of good music, actually.
Oh, don't forget. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, absolutely. The problem is often that all the ones that you've heard of, First Aid Kit and others who are here, they sing in English because that's how they get known, to be known, even in Sweden. You know, you go and you do your career in America, and then you go back to Sweden, and people will know who you are. Otherwise, they won't. So a lot of them have English text, but there are some quality stuff that is in the language too, which is
there's that band Movits.
Movits.
Yeah.
You are teaching me something. What are the Movits? Yeah.
Well, like 6 years ago, they were really big.
Oh, cool.
And they sing in Swedish.
Okay. I have to
Yeah, it's M-O-V-I-T-S. And it's actually very clear Swedish.
Okay.
So, and of course it's
Yeah,
never heard of that.
Yeah. So, but also, and you can search Swedish playlists and you find more artists there that's in Swedish. And Sweden is a big music exporter.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it's one of the main industries.
Yeah, more than you'd expect for the size of the country.
Yeah.
Anders asks, how come Scandinavian language classes are so popular in Colorado?
I wish they were more popular.
Well,
I want more students, but no, Swedish and Danish are one of few less commonly taught languages that are offered here. So you can study the major languages, of course, but then if you want something a little bit more exotic or foreign, then that's what people tend to gravitate towards. Yeah.
I think a lot of it actually has to do with a certain affinity between Colorado and Scandinavia.
Oh, of course, yeah, I think maybe. But how do you know that unless you meet a Swede or something?
But there is a certain affinity. I mean, both cultures, if I can call Colorado a culture, and I guess I kind of can, are very oriented toward the outside.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of Scandinavians in this
liberal, fairly,
in different ways.
But not the same.
But no,
it's just very different. But there's
small
at least that. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why so many Swedes end up here in this area.
It's a lot.
Yeah, there's so many of us, and from all the Nordic countries, and I mean that's certainly why I chose to live in Colorado, because I felt this is a little bit like home,
Why did you come here originally? I mean, other than the obvious answer that there's no more
yeah,
beautiful.
there is the most common answer was Leonhardt-Lupa in Immersion with my husband. Yeah, we met in England, sort of halfway in between, and you know, we lived in Sweden for a while, and then we came over here, and yeah, here we are.
I see. Okay. I thought maybe you were just so taken with the Rocky Mountains that you just...
Well, that's why it's here and not other places that we chose to live at originally. Yeah.
So here at the University of Colorado, you're offering 3 years of Swedish.
Yeah.
You have this frequent fika with the Nordic Club, which is recently getting a little bit revitalized. We have events, we have more speakers, some Scandinavian movie nights, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And
awesome.
That's awesome because it's a one project basically. I mean, you are Swedish at the University of Colorado.
Yeah. If you don't like me, and then yeah, no, it's not. It's not. Maybe it's both the strength and
it's a strength.
How you, but I think it's a strength because I really get to know my students well, and because of that, we have a relationship where we can talk to each other and say,
that's awesome.
This is not working, and this is yeah. So, and especially in the more advanced classes, of course, you know, there's much more focus on what you want to do.
Well, and when you have a smaller class, also, it's so much better for the instructor. You feel so much more connected with students. Versus me, I'm like with 230 students.
No, I did great. That's a different. No, I'm so blessed to have these classes, and students are just great, and we have a lot of fun.
Well, they're blessed to have you as a teacher. We do have a question here. Matt Markley, are there any recommended techniques for improving listening comprehension?
Oh, yeah.
That's a big deal.
That is,
subtitles.
If you subtitles. If you can, yeah. And even if it's either Swedish or English subtitles will help you. And so you can do that if you go to for instance, the Swedish TV. You can stream a lot of programs. So svtplay.se. And on their website, you have to opt in to have the subtitles, but you can get those on in Swedish. And if you can both listen and see the text, that tends to make it easier. And if you can press stop every once in a while and sort of to retake and do it again. For that reason, what I do in my class, I actually find that the text that with the material that I can get that's recorded by other voices than me, it tends to be really fast. You know, it's supposed to be natural pace, and the natural pace is like I can't even keep up sometimes.
Right.
Yeah. So we slow it down, and we, and Alltech, which is our tech center here, helps us to do that, to make it more easy for students. But if you're not in class and you don't have access to those resources, if you can get sound files and you can slow them down in some freeware, you can do that. That's helpful. But definitely movies that has the subtitles.
I would also add, even if you can't find subtitles, if you can find podcasts or TV shows or something, and of course you can find these for Norwegian at nrk.no, for Icelandic at ruv.is. That's their BBC equivalents in those different countries. If you find shows aimed at younger viewers, like it doesn't, like I'm not talking about like baby shows.
No, but simple language is not the most, it's
right.
Like too abstract.
And especially if you already have some expectations about the vocabulary in it.
Yeah.
So like I would watch, I can't remember this guy's name, but when I was really trying to keep my modern Icelandic up, there was, I think his name is Ivar or something along those lines, but I would watch this Icelandic TV show that was basically like Bill Nye the Science Guy. But each thing was like a 5-6 minute little episode, and I would know what he was going to talk about. Like, okay, he's going to talk about volcanoes.
Right on.
So like,
so good for you.
Yeah, but so I would kind of be able to expect what the vocabulary would be. Like I could kind of like look up, like, okay, this is volcano, this is lava, or whatever. That would help me a little bit.
That's brilliant. That's really good. And one more resource I can share is the Swedish news. There's an easy version. It's for people who are new to Sweden. and they speak in simplified language and they slow down a bit.
What is that called?
Nyheter på lätt svenska.
That's easy.
Yeah.
Using easy Swedish.
Yeah, you got the umlauts on some of the but using easy Swedish, even if you didn't Google that in English, you'll probably get the links to it.
That's really nice.
Yeah. So that's one way, and they have the text too, so you can see the text and listen to it.
That's all. Yeah, that's also.
A lot of websites in Sweden have that feature. You can just click on that and you'll hear the speech as well.
I think actually Bibeln.se has somebody reading each book of the Bible. If you know the Bible,
I'm sure.
if you're into that.
Yeah.
Most Scandinavian languages, their local churches have made a website like that. If you want,
they're all books also, and books that are no longer copyrighted.
Sure. Although the Swedish may be really archaic.
Exactly. But if you're interested.
The jingo. Stuff. That's how I speak Swedish. Because it really gets great attention.
Yeah, how do you distinguish that? Yeah.
And if you're into, by the way, if you are into Old Norse subjects, Heimskringla.no has translations of all the Old Norse sagas, poems, prosetta, that kind of stuff, into Norwegian, Swedish, Danish. It tends to be pretty old-fashioned, but
there should be.
But it's a nice way. Depends on your tastes.
Yeah.
But it's.
I don't have the modern.
I don't have very old-fashioned taste when it comes to this stuff. But that's one way you could practice Swedish. Like, say you want to read Havamal in Swedish to practice your Swedish. You can keep an English translation or something to the side to kind of see how much you comprehended and whether you got it right.
English translation.
Well, I'm not trying to be that self-promotional, but that's something if you're interested in Old Norse stuff and you want to practice a much Scandinavian language, that's a great resource. And then, again, these Milanese TV shows. That Nyheter på lätt svenska, that sounds awesome.
No, that is good. And it's always refreshing, right? So you don't have to listen to the same story.
Well, and a great way to just get the news, right? Like this is something.
That's something that, like you say, you know a little bit what's coming.
Right.
It's about Trump or it's about this or that, the weather, or it's the corona, lots of corona right now. So you have an idea and you get a lot of the words that are commonalities.
That's a great idea.
Like that. So.
And you also have different speakers, right? So it's not like it's one
exactly.
person.
You don't want to hear me or anyone else speaking all the time.
All right. Well, folks, thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for your Patreon support, and go forth and learn some Swedish. You've got some great resources mentioned here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you'd be happy to help.
Jajamensan, det är klart jag hjälper er allihopa med frågor och sånt där. Det är bara att köra på. Lycka till allihopa.
Fantastic.
Hej då.
All the best for beautiful Colorado.